Once upon a time, there lived a single father named Mr. Benson and his young son, Jackson. Mr. Benson was a hard-working man who had lost his wife a few years ago, leaving him to care for Jackson on his own. Despite his busy schedule, Mr. Benson made sure that Jackson was well taken care of and received a good education. One day, Mr. Benson gave Jackson a sum of money to pay his school fees. He was too busy with work to go to the school himself, so he trusted Jackson with the responsibility. "Keep the money safe, Jackson," Mr. Benson said with a serious tone. "It's very important. You mustn't lose it." Jackson nodded, understanding the importance of his father's words. He carefully placed the money in his pocket and set off for school. As he walked, Jackson felt proud that his father trusted him with such an important task. But as he neared the school, Jackson realized with a sinking heart that the money was no longer in his pocket. He stopped and frantically searched every corner of his bag and pockets, but the money was gone. Panic washed over Jackson. He retraced his steps, hoping to find the lost money on the road, but it was nowhere to be seen. With tears in his eyes, Jackson continued to search, but it was no use. The money was gone, and Jackson knew he would be in big trouble. When Jackson arrived at school, his teacher asked for the school fees, but Jackson had nothing to give. Embarrassed and scared, he explained that he had lost the money. The teacher, though sympathetic, had no choice but to send Jackson home until the fees could be paid. As Jackson walked home, his heart was heavy with fear and sadness. He didn't know how to face his father and tell him what had happened. Tears streamed down his face as he imagined the disappointment and anger in his father's eyes. As Jackson walked along the busy streets, he was so lost in his thoughts that he barely noticed the people around him. His tears blurred his vision and he felt utterly alone. He passed by shops and stalls, but nothing could take his mind off the lost money and the trouble he would face at home. Near the side of the road, a woman named Madame Caroline was selling cookies and small meals from a simple stall. She was a kind-hearted woman, known for her warm smile and gentle nature, but life had not been easy for her. She worked hard every day to support herself and her 2 young daughters. That day, Madame Caroline noticed Jackson as he walked by, his face red from crying. Concerned, she called out to him, "Young man, why are you crying?" Jackson stopped, surprised that someone had noticed him. He wiped his eyes and hesitated for a moment before walking over to her stall. There was something comforting about the woman's voice, and he felt he could trust her. "I lost the money my father gave me for my school fees," Jackson said quietly, his voice shaking. "I can't find it anywhere, and now I'm afraid to go home. My father will be so angry." Madame Caroline listened carefully, her heart aching for the young boy. She knew how important it was to pay school fees on time and how hard it could be to earn money. For a moment, she thought about her own struggles and the little money she had made that day. But as she looked at Jackson's tearful face, she made a decision. Reaching into the small pouch where she kept her earnings, Madame Caroline pulled out some crumpled bills. It wasn't much, just enough to cover her needs for the day, but she handed it to Jackson with a kind smile. "Take this," she said softly. "It's enough to pay your school fees." Jackson stared at the money in disbelief. He couldn't believe that a stranger would be so kind, especially when he knew how hard it was for people to make a living. His hands shook as he accepted the money. thank you so much," Jackson exclaimed, his voice filled with relief. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." Madame Caroline smiled gently. "There's no need to repay me. Just promise me you'll do well in school and make your father proud. That will be enough." Jackson nodded eagerly. "I will, I promise," he said. Then, with the money safely in his pocket, he hurried home, grateful for the kindness of the woman he had just met. But in his relief and haste, Jackson forgot to tell his father about Madame Caroline's help. The days passed, and the memory of the lost money began to fade, but Jackson never forgot the woman who had saved him from trouble that day. Months passed, and life continued as usual for Jackson and his father. Jackson kept up with his studies, and Mr. Benson continued to work hard to provide for his son. Then, one day, Mr. Benson received some incredible news. After years of hard work, he had won a major contract that brought in a lot of money. The Benson family was suddenly wealthy, and their lives changed overnight. With their newfound wealth, Mr. Benson and Jackson moved into a bigger, more comfortable home. They bought a new car, and Jackson received new clothes and shoes. Life seemed perfect, And Jackson was happy, but deep down he couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. One afternoon, as Mr. Benson and Jackson were driving through the city, they passed by a street that looked familiar to Jackson. He suddenly remembered the day he had lost the money for his school fees and the kind woman who had helped him. Jackson felt a pang of guilt as he realized he had never thanked her properly or even told his father about her. "Dad," Jackson said hesitantly, breaking the silence in the car, "can we stop here for a moment? There's something I need to check." Mr. Benson, curious but willing to indulge his son, pulled over to the side of the road. Jackson got out of the car and walked to where Madame Caroline's stall had once stood. But when he reached the spot, he was disappointed to find it empty. There was no sign of her or her stall. Confused, he approached a nearby vendor and asked if they knew what had happened to the woman who used to sell food there. "Oh, Madame Caroline," the vendor said with a sad shake of his head. "She hasn't been around for a while. Times got tough for her, and she had to leave. I'm not sure where she went, but I heard things haven't been easy for her." Jackson's heart sank. He hadn't expected her to disappear, and he felt a deep sense of guilt for not finding her sooner. All those months, while his life had gotten better, the woman who had helped him was struggling. He suddenly realized how careless he had been by not telling his father the truth earlier. When Jackson returned to the car, his father noticed the troubled look on his face. "Is everything okay?" Mr. Benson asked. Jackson took a deep breath, deciding it was finally time to tell his father everything. "Dad, there's something I need to tell you. Remember when you gave me money for my school fees last year? I lost it on the way to school, and I didn't know what to do. I was scared to tell you, but a woman selling food by the roadside saw me crying and gave me the money I needed. I never told you because I was too ashamed. Now I came back to find her and repay her, but she's gone. I feel terrible." Mr. Benson was silent for a moment, processing what his son had just confessed. He wasn't angry, but he felt a mixture of surprise and concern. "Why didn't you tell me back then, Jackson? You didn't have to go through that alone." Jackson looked down, ashamed. "I was scared you'd be disappointed in me. But now I regret not telling you. We could have helped her sooner." Mr. Benson sighed and placed a reassuring hand on Jackson's shoulder. "You made a mistake, but you're trying to make it right now, and that's what matters. We'll do everything we can to find her and help her. She did a good thing, and it's only fair that we repay her kindness." With that decision, they began asking around, hoping to trace where Madame Caroline might have gone. But every lead came to a dead end. No one seemed to know where she had moved or what had happened to her. As the days turned into weeks, it became clear that finding Madame Caroline would be much harder than they thought. Jackson couldn't shake the guilt he felt, but he made a promise to himself that he would keep searching until he found her. After all, he owed his education, and much of the happiness he now enjoyed, to the woman who had helped him when no one else did. Time passed, and Jackson grew older. He continued to excel in school and eventually decided to pursue a career in medicine. His father, proud of his son's achievements, supported Jackson every step of the way. Jackson earned a scholarship to study medicine abroad, and soon he was on his way to fulfilling his dream of becoming a doctor. During his time abroad, Jackson worked hard and learned as much as he could. He never forgot about Madame Caroline, the woman who had helped him when he needed it most. Her kindness had stayed with him all these years, and he often wondered what had happened to her. After completing his studies, Jackson returned home and, with his father's help, opened a new hospital in the city. It was his way of giving back to the community that had supported him throughout his life. The hospital was modern and well-equipped, and Jackson was proud of what he had accomplished. Meanwhile, life had not been so kind to Madame Caroline and her daughters. After her husband's death, Madame Caroline had struggled to make ends meet. Her husband's family had taken everything from her, leaving her with nothing. She and her daughters, Miracle and Lizzie, were forced to live in an unfinished building on the outskirts of the city. Miracle and Lizzie tried to help their mother by selling fruits on the street, but the money they earned was barely enough to survive. They had to drop out of school because Madame Caroline couldn't afford the fees, and their lives were a constant struggle. One day, as Miracle and Lizzie were selling fruit near a busy road, tragedy struck. Lizzie was crossing the street when a car came speeding towards her. She didn't see it in time, and the car hit her, throwing her to the ground. Miracle screamed and rushed to her sister's side, but Lizzie was unconscious, and there was blood everywhere. People gathered around as Miracle knelt by her sister, crying and begging for help. Someone called for an ambulance, and a kind stranger offered to take them to the nearest hospital. Miracle, her heart pounding with fear, agreed, and they rushed to the hospital, hoping that Lizzie would be okay. When they arrived, the hospital staff quickly took Lizzie into the emergency room, but there was a problem. The doctors asked Miracle for payment before they could begin treatment, but Miracle had no money. She pleaded with the doctors, telling them that her sister was seriously injured and needed immediate help, but they refused to treat Lizzie without payment. Miracle's heart broke as she watched Lizzie's condition worsen before her eyes. Desperate, she fell to her knees, begging anyone who would listen, but it seemed like no one cared. The minutes dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity, until finally a doctor came to check on Lizzie. But by then, it was too late. Lizzie took her last breath in that cold, uncaring hospital, and Miracle's world shattered. When Madame Caroline arrived at the hospital, she found Miracle sobbing beside Lizzie's lifeless body. The sight broke her heart into pieces. Lizzie had been her youngest, her joy, and now she was gone. Overwhelmed with grief and despair, Madame Caroline held her daughters close, mourning the loss of her precious child. Life became even harder for Madame Caroline and Miracle after Lizzie's death. The unfinished building they lived in felt emptier, and the burden of grief was almost too much to bear. Madame Caroline, who had always been strong for her daughters, began to fall into a deep depression. She could barely get out of bed, let alone work. Miracle tried her best to take care of her mother, but she was just a young girl, and the weight of it all was crushing her. Days turned into weeks, and Madame Caroline's health continued to decline. Without proper food, rest, or medical care, she grew weaker by the day. Miracle, now the sole provider, struggled to sell enough fruit to buy even a little food. But no matter how hard she tried, it was never enough. One evening, as she sat by her mother's bedside, Miracle knew she had to do something drastic. Madame Caroline was getting worse, and if Miracle didn't act quickly, she feared she might lose her too. Gathering what little money she had managed to save, Miracle made the difficult decision to take her mother back to the hospital, hoping and praying they would help her this time. Miracle and her mother arrived at the hospital late in the evening. The bright lights and busy halls felt overwhelming, but Miracle was determined not to let anything stop her. She struggled to help her weak mother inside, her heart pounding with fear and hope. As they made their way to the reception desk, Miracle noticed a doctor walking by, a tall man in a white coat who looked busy but kind. The doctor glanced at them, then stopped in his tracks as recognition flickered across his face. It was Jackson. Though it had been many years since that day on the street, Jackson had never forgotten Madame Caroline. Her kindness had stayed with him all those years, and now, here she was, in need of help. "Excuse me," Jackson said gently, stepping towards Miracle and her mother. "Do you need assistance?" Miracle, her voice trembling with desperation, nodded. "Please, my mother is very sick, but we don't have any money. Please don't let her die like my sister." Jackson's heart ached as he heard the girl's words and saw the condition of the woman beside her. Though Miracle didn't recognize him, Jackson instantly knew who they were. Madame Caroline's face, though worn and tired, was one he would never forget. "Don't worry," Jackson said softly, his voice filled with emotion. "I'll take care of everything." Without another word, Jackson called for a nurse to bring a stretcher, and they carefully lifted Madame Caroline onto it. Jackson personally oversaw her admission and made sure she received immediate care. Miracle followed closely, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and relief. As the medical team began to treat Madame Caroline, Jackson took a moment to speak with Miracle. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Miracle," she replied, wiping tears from her eyes. Jackson nodded, his suspicions confirmed. "And your mother's name? Is it Madame Caroline?" Miracle looked at Jackson with surprise. "Yes, how do you know her?" Jackson smiled sadly. "Your mother helped me a long time ago, when I was in need. I've been looking for her ever since, to thank her. I owe her a great debt, and now it's my turn to help her." Miracle stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. "You knew my mother?" "Yes," Jackson replied. And I promise you, I'll do everything I can to make sure she gets better." Over the next few days, Jackson made good on his promise. He ensured that Madame Caroline received the best possible care, and he checked on her regularly. Under Jackson's watchful eye, Madame Caroline slowly began to recover. Miracle, too, stayed by her mother's side, never leaving her alone. As Madame Caroline's health improved, Jackson began to think about what would happen next. He knew they couldn't go back to living in that unfinished building. They needed a safe and comfortable place to stay, while Madame Caroline continued her recovery. One evening, as he sat by Madame Caroline's bedside, Jackson shared his thoughts with her and Miracle. "When you're well enough to leave the hospital," he said, "I want you both to come stay with me and my father. We have more than enough room, and you'll be safe and comfortable there." Madame Caroline looked at Jackson, her eyes filling with gratitude and tears. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice still weak but full of emotion. "You're a blessing to us, Jackson. I don't know how to repay you." "You already have," Jackson replied, smiling gently. "All those years ago, you helped me when I needed it most. Now it's my turn to help you." Miracle, who had been silent, finally spoke up. "Thank you, Dr. Jackson. You've done so much for us. We'll never forget your kindness." Madame Caroline and Miracle were overwhelmed with gratitude when they moved into Mr. Benson's house. It was like a dream come true. The large, comfortable rooms, the warm meals, and the kindness they received felt like a blessing after years of hardship. Miracle couldn't remember the last time she and her mother had felt so safe and cared for. Jackson made sure they felt at home from the moment they arrived. He spent time with Miracle, showing her around the house, helping her settle in, and even introducing her to some of his friends. Though Miracle had grown up in poverty and had never been to a proper school, she was bright, curious, and eager to learn. Jackson noticed this and admired her for it. He began teaching her basic reading and writing in the evenings after work, and their friendship quickly deepened. As the weeks turned into months, Jackson found himself drawn more and more to Miracle. Her resilience, kindness, and cheerful nature warmed his heart. Despite everything she had gone through, she remained hopeful and full of life. They often spent hours talking, laughing, and sharing their dreams. Jackson began to see her not just as a friend, but as someone special, someone he could see a future with. Miracle, too, developed feelings for Jackson. He had shown her nothing but kindness since the day they met at the hospital. His patience while teaching her, his respect for her mother, and the way he listened to her made her feel valued in a way she never had before. She admired his intelligence, his dedication to his work, and most of all, his big heart. Over time, she realized she was falling in love with him. But as their feelings for each other grew, so did the challenges. Mr. Benson noticed the way Jackson looked at Miracle, and he was not pleased. He had worked hard to build a successful life for himself and his son, and he had big dreams for Jackson. In his mind, Miracle did not fit into those plans. She was poor, uneducated, and from a background he saw as beneath them. Mr. Benson couldn't understand why Jackson would be interested in someone like her when there were so many other women who were more suitable. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, Mr. Benson decided to address the issue. He had been watching closely and could no longer stay silent. "Jackson," he began in a serious tone, "I've noticed you've been spending a lot of time with Miracle lately. I think it's time we talked about it." Jackson knew where this conversation was heading, and his heart sank. "What do you mean, Dad?" he asked, trying to stay calm. "You know exactly what I mean," Mr. Benson replied firmly. "You're getting too close to her. I see the way you look at her, and I don't like it. You're a successful young man with a bright future ahead of you. You can't afford to get involved with someone like her." Jackson felt a surge of anger rise within him. "Someone like her? What do you mean by that, Dad? Miracle is a good person, and she's been through so much. She deserves happiness just like anyone else." Mr. Benson shook his head. "You don't understand, Jackson. It's not just about her being a good person. It's about where she comes from, her lack of education, her background. You've worked hard to get to where you are, and you need to be with someone who matches your level, someone who can help you grow, not hold you back." Jackson's face hardened. "Dad, Miracle doesn't hold me back. In fact, she's helped me see life in a different way. She's strong, smart, and kind. Why should it matter where she comes from or how much education she has? People can learn, grow, and change. What matters is the kind of person she is. But Mr. Benson was not convinced. You're young, Jackson, and you're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. Love isn't enough in the real world. Marriage is a partnership, and it needs to be based on more than just feelings. You need someone who can stand by you in society, who fits into your circle. Miracle simply doesn't have what it takes. Jackson's frustration boiled over. Dad, you're being unfair. You don't even know her the way I do. You're judging her without giving her a chance. All you see is her background, but you're not looking at who she is. Mr. Benson stood up from the table, his voice cold and firm. I've made up my mind, Jackson. I won't approve of this. You're my only son, and I want the best for you. You need to focus on your career and your future. There are plenty of other women who would be more suitable for you. Jackson was silent, his mind racing with anger and disappointment. He had always respected his father's wishes, but this was different. For the first time, he felt torn between following his father's advice and following his heart. He couldn't deny his feelings for Miracle, but he also didn't want to disappoint the man who had raised him. Miracle, who had overheard part of the conversation, felt her heart break. She had always feared that something like this would happen. Despite her growing love for Jackson, she knew deep down that they came from different worlds. She had hoped that love could bridge that gap, but Mr. Benson's harsh words made her feel small, unworthy, and ashamed of her past. For days, the tension in the house was thick. Jackson avoided talking to his father, and Miracle kept her distance, unsure of what to do. She didn't want to cause trouble between Jackson and his father, but she couldn't deny the pain she felt. Jackson was at a crossroads. He knew he had to make a choice, listen to his father's advice, and let go of the woman he loved. After the heated argument between Jackson and his father, tension filled the house. Mr. Benson could feel the strain between himself and his son growing day by day. Though he stood firm in his belief that Jackson needed to stay away from Miracle, he could also see how deeply his son cared for her. Determined to put an end to what he considered an unsuitable relationship, Mr. Benson decided it was time for Madame Caroline and Miracle to leave his home. One evening, Mr. Benson called Madame Caroline into his study for a private conversation. She entered the room with a nervous smile, unsure of what to expect. She had been grateful for the hospitality and kindness she and her daughter had received, and she had done everything possible not to be a burden. But now, seeing the serious expression on Mr. Benson's face, she could sense that something was wrong. "Please sit down, Madame Caroline," Mr. Benson said, his tone formal and distant. Madame Caroline took a seat, her heart racing. "Is everything all right, sir?" she asked, concern clear in her voice. Mr. Benson leaned back in his chair and took a deep breath. "Yes, everything is fine. But I think it's time we make some changes. You've been staying here for some time now, and while I'm glad I could help, it's best for everyone if you find your own place to live." Madame Caroline's face fell in shock. She hadn't expected this at all. "Sir, have I done something wrong? If I have offended you or caused any trouble, please tell me. I'm truly sorry if that's the case." Mr. Benson shook his head quickly, avoiding her gaze. "No, it's nothing like that. You haven't done anything wrong. I appreciate what you did for my son all those years ago. In fact, that's why I'm doing this. I'm giving you enough money to rent a decent apartment and start a new life. Consider it repayment for the kindness you showed Jackson back then." He slid an envelope full of cash across the table toward her. Madame Caroline stared at it, her hands trembling. She didn't want to take the money. It felt wrong. She had never helped Jackson for any reward. Her actions had been out of pure compassion, not expecting anything in return. But looking at Mr. Benson's stern expression, she knew she had no choice. The decision was made, and she couldn't refuse the money without offending him further. With a heavy heart, she picked up the envelope. "Thank you, sir," she said quietly. "I don't want to take this, but I have no choice. I appreciate everything you've done for us, and I'm grateful for the shelter and support you've given. But I can't help but feel that I've overstayed my welcome." Mr. Benson's face remained unreadable. He nodded slightly. "You've been more than welcome, Madame Caroline. But it's time for you and your daughter to move on and build your own life. You deserve that opportunity." Madame Caroline left the study, holding the envelope tightly in her hands. Tears filled her eyes as she thought about how suddenly everything had changed. She had started to believe that things were finally looking up for her and Miracle, but now it felt like they were being pushed out just when they had found a place to call home. When she told Miracle about the conversation, the young girl was heartbroken. She had grown attached to Jackson and had started to feel like part of a family again. Now they were being forced to leave, and she didn't understand why. Miracle had overheard some of the arguments between Jackson and his father, but she hadn't realized just how serious the situation had become. Meanwhile, Jackson returned home later that evening and immediately sensed that something was wrong. The usual warmth in the house was replaced with a cold silence. He found his father sitting in the living room, reading a newspaper, looking as if nothing had happened. But Jackson's instincts told him otherwise. "Dad, what's going on?" Jackson demanded, his voice filled with concern. Mr. Benson looked up calmly. "What do you mean?" "Everything is fine." "No, it's not," Jackson shot back. "I can tell something's wrong. Where are Miracle and her mother?" "They're packing," Mr. Benson replied coolly. "I've arranged for them to move out. I gave Madame Caroline some money to rent an apartment. They'll be leaving tomorrow." Jackson's eyes widened in disbelief. "You did what? How could you do that without even telling me?" "I don't need your permission, Jackson," Mr. Benson replied, his voice firm. "This is my house, and I make the decisions here. I did what I thought was best for everyone. You'll thank me later." Jackson was furious. "You pushed them out because you think they're not good enough. This has nothing to do with what's best for them or me. It's all about your pride and your outdated beliefs about social class. You're treating them like they're beneath us, and that's not fair." Mr. Benson stood up, matching Jackson's anger with his own. "Watch your tone, Jackson. I'm your father, and I know what's best for you. You need to focus on your future and not get distracted by someone who can't help you reach your goals. Love alone doesn't build a stable life, and you need to be practical." Jackson shook his head, frustration burning in his chest. "You're wrong, Dad. Miracle is more than just her background. She's smart, determined, and capable of so much. You're too blind to see it because you're stuck in your old ways." "Enough," Mr. Benson snapped. "I've made my decision, and that's final. They're leaving tomorrow, and there's nothing more to discuss." Jackson stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. His heart was pounding with a mix of anger and sadness. He knew his father was stubborn, but he never expected him to go this far. That night, as Jackson lay in bed, he decided to come up with a plan. He knew that arguing with his father would not change anything. The idea of losing Miracle and Madame Caroline made him desperate. He believed that if his father thought he was seriously ill, it might force him to keep them close. Jackson decided to fake a health emergency. He called his friend Chris, who was a doctor at the hospital. Jackson explained his plan and asked Chris to tell his father that he had kidney failure and needed an urgent transplant. Jackson hoped this would make his father feel worried enough to keep Miracle and Madame Caroline around to take care of him. The next morning, Jackson acted out his plan. During breakfast, he pretended to feel dizzy and collapsed. His father panicked and immediately called for an ambulance. They rushed Jackson to the hospital, where Chris was ready to play his part. After running fake tests, Chris told Mr. Benson that Jackson had kidney failure and needed someone to stay with him at the hospital at all times. Mr. Benson was shocked and worried. He realized he couldn't manage the situation on his own and would need someone he trusted to care for Jackson. Knowing that Miracle and Madame Caroline were already close to Jackson, he decided they should stay with him at the hospital. Jackson's plan worked just as he hoped. His father agreed that Miracle and her mother should remain close to provide care. However, Jackson knew that this lie couldn't last forever. For now, he had bought time, but he needed to figure out how to resolve the situation before everything spiraled out of control. Mr. Benson was devastated after hearing the news of Jackson's supposed condition. Every night he cried and prayed, asking God to keep his only son alive. He realized how much Jackson meant to him and felt helpless in the face of the situation. The thought of losing Jackson was too painful to bear, and he regretted not appreciating every moment he had with him before now. Meanwhile, Miracle never left Jackson's side. She spent hours by his bed, praying for him and hoping for a miracle.
She could see how much Mr. Benson was suffering, and her heart ached for both of them. The atmosphere was heavy with worry, but Miracle refused to give up. She believed deep down that Jackson would pull through, and she was ready to do whatever it took to save him. One day, Dr. Chris informed Mr. Benson that they couldn't find a suitable match for Jackson's kidney transplant. He explained that even though Mr. Benson was willing, his age and health made him an unsuitable donor. Hearing this news, Mr. Benson was crushed. He felt like everything was falling apart and didn't know where else to turn. All he could do was continue to pray and hope for a miracle. When Miracle heard the news from Dr. Chris, she felt a strong determination rising within her. That evening, she told her mother about the situation. Miracle explained how badly she wanted to help Jackson, who had always been there for her and her mother. Madame Caroline listened carefully, and though worried, supported her daughter's decision. Miracle decided that she was ready to give Jackson her kidney if it meant saving his life. The next day, Miracle went straight to the hospital and told Dr. Chris that she was willing to be tested as a donor. Dr. Chris was surprised by her courage and agreed to run the tests. After a few hours, he came back with the results. Miracle was a perfect match. Dr. Chris was both relieved and worried. Relieved because they finally had a match, but worried because the situation was getting out of hand. He realized that Jackson's lie had gone too far, and it was time to put an end to it. Dr. Chris called Jackson aside and told him that they needed to stop this fake illness before it got out of control. He explained how serious it had become, with people ready to sacrifice for him. Jackson knew Chris was right, and he felt a wave of guilt wash over him. He realized that the situation had gone beyond what he ever intended. Miracle's willingness to donate her kidney touched Jackson deeply. He saw how selfless and loving she truly was, and he knew he had to come clean. Later that day, Mr. Benson came to visit Jackson at the hospital, expecting to see his son in a weakened state. But when he entered the room, he was surprised to find Jackson looking healthy and energetic. Confused, he asked what was going on. Jackson took a deep breath and decided it was time to confess. He told his father everything, the plan he had made with Dr. Chris, how he faked his illness to stop Miracle and her mother from leaving, and how desperate he had been to keep them close. He explained that he had done it because he couldn't bear to see them treated unfairly and wanted to show his father their true worth. Jackson also told his father about Miracle's decision to donate her kidney, even though she had no idea it was all a lie. Mr. Benson was stunned. He could hardly believe that his son would go to such lengths just to protect Miracle and her mother. But what truly shocked him was Miracle's selflessness. She had been willing to risk her own life to save Jackson's, even after all the hardships they had faced. For the first time, Mr. Benson realized how wrong he had been in judging Miracle and her mother based on their social status. He saw that true worth wasn't about wealth or education, it was about the heart. When they returned home, Mr. Benson called everyone together. With tears in his eyes, he sincerely apologized to Madame Caroline and Miracle for how he had treated them. He admitted that he had been blinded by pride and had failed to see their kindness and character. Madame Caroline, with her gentle spirit, forgave him immediately. Miracle, too, accepted his apology, happy that the tension between them was finally gone. Over time, things improved greatly for everyone. With Jackson's support, Miracle was able to enroll in the university and pursue her dreams. She studied hard and eventually graduated with honors. Throughout her journey, Jackson stood by her side, offering encouragement and love. The bond between them grew stronger, and they realized that they were meant to be together. A few years later, Jackson and Miracle got married in a beautiful ceremony surrounded by family and friends. Mr. Benson gave them his full blessing, proud of the woman Miracle had become. They started a new chapter of their lives, filled with love, mutual respect, and understanding. Madame Caroline was overjoyed to see her daughter happy and settled. She no longer had to struggle, and her life had taken a positive turn. The family that had once been divided by misunderstandings was now united by love. And so, Jackson and Miracle's love story became a symbol of how genuine care, forgiveness, and understanding can overcome any obstacle.
Dear viewers, what lessons did you take away from this dramatic tale? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed the story, give us a thumbs up, share it with friends, and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest updates. Thanks for watching and stay blessed.